today in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Caru News, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, Organ Donation India Foundation and GYAN. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. And today's topic is not only current, very relevant and very hot, because everybody knows that the India is going to have a new budget on 1st February 2022. So the topic is Union Budget 2022, challenges and expectations. Now there are a few key challenges are as follows. One is rising inflation, growing unemployment, income tax reliefs, economic output, fiscal deficit, and privatizations. Inflation is already very elevated. A high fiscal deficit can give it wind. High fiscal deficit will cause further widening of current account deficit. High current account deficit can weaken the rupee, add to inflation concerns. RBI will be forced to raise rates to contain inflation and deficit, and rising interest rates could dent economic recovery. So these are few of the key challenges which the Finance Minister of India has to face while presenting her budget on 1st of February. But there are a few expectations also. The real estate sector expects tax reliefs and industry status. Experts want budget to focus on bridging widened inequality in economy and create jobs. PVC producers say leave the import duty on material untouched. Pharma industry wants budget to announce incentives for conducting R&D. More budget spending on infrastructure. Budget should announce something to encourage entities to build a world-class shipping line. Aluminium Association seeks elimination of coal cess in upcoming union budget. Small businesses and MSMEs seeks easier access to capital at lower interest rates. Budget 2022 will have the gating factors facing the EV industry on top of its agenda. Many mutual fund managers are hoping for an enhanced limit for Section 80C. Auto and auto ancillary sector is eyeing a handful of SOPs and consumption boosting measures. And the general public expect that the petroleum products should come under GST. Now, to discuss this very, very important topic today, that is Union Budget 2022, challenges and expectations, we have a very expert, knowledgeable, learned panel with us who are renowned economists also. And I would like to invite my first panelist guest, and he is Professor Mohanlal Agarwal. Professor Mohanlal Agarwal is the former professor of marketing, innovation and management, IIM Lucknow, XLRI Jamshedpur, and California State University, USA. He is president of Indo-Gulf Management Association. He is US Fulbright Fellow Boston, EFMD Fellow Paris, and British Council Fellow London. In 2019, he was ranked among the 251 most fabulous global education leaders. And I would like to inform my viewers that today's program is in association with Indo-Gulf Management Association. Welcome, Professor Mohanlal Agarwal on our show. Professor Mohanlal Agarwal, although you are a professor of marketing and innovation, but you are also the president of Indo-Gulf Management Association. So you know the pulse of not only Indian businessmen or Indian public, but also the NRIs. What are their expectations? Because there are lots of expectations from each and every field. And the challenges are so much because of the last 2 years pandemic, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So now we would like to know your views on Union Budget 2022, challenges and expectations. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, please. Please unmute.
Thank you very much, Goel Saab, for a very, very kind but definitely inaccurate description. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not an economist. And I have only very little knowledge of economics, being a commerce and management student. So from that point of view, I would like to apologize to your viewers that out of love and affection, Mr. Goel has said what he has said about me, but that's not true. As far as I'm concerned, I am only trying to observe things which are happening around me, around us, and make some kind of sense out of that. And out of that sense, whatever capability I have in terms of communicating and articulating, I'm trying to share that with my colleagues, with my viewers, with all of, so that I can also learn and relearn in the same process. If we look at the union budget, it used to be the most important document in the relationship between the government and society. Maybe I would say 10 years ago or 20 years ago, definitely before the liberalization that took place in 1993-94. So from that point of view, you can say that Dr. Manmohan Singh has reduced the importance of budget as just one statement coming from the government, maybe a major one, but this is not the only thing that will come to the government. Gone are also the days when one of our most revered economist and jurist, Dr. Nani Palkhiwala, who would hold attention of thousands of people in Shivaji Park in Mumbai and analyze the budget before and after to the Bombay people, where CEOs and wonderful people will come and attend. Now that particular thing is also gone thanks to the social media, where we are receiving every day some kind of critique or the other from everyone, including the common man, and not just from the experts and from the people who are policy makers, policy advisors, as well as policy observers. So if I have to give my commentary before I listen to my learned panel of all the three people whom I hold in very, very high respect for their views and insights, if I were to write this budget speech of the finance minister and give some direction to it, I probably would have given this 5 E's as the direction. 5 E's. And let me begin with one each E, and then I will explain the expectations under each E. The first, I believe, is the equity. There should be absolute equity in terms of treating people to people, industry to industry. In other words, harmonization, rationalization, reform, everything should be there under that particular equity term. Even I would say harmonization between individuals and non-individuals in terms of taxation is concerned, that should also be there. So this is for me, number one guiding principle, equity. The second E for me would be efficiency or effectiveness, or efficiency and effectiveness. Both I would put together, and this will be in terms of using our resources the best, using the resources for the purpose for which we had made them. So both effectiveness, goal efficiency, as well as utilization efficiency should be there in terms of efficiency and effectiveness as far as the government and relationship with the government is concerned. Probably tax administration would be one of them. Probably the way we are using government funds could also be one of them. So therefore, there could be a number of things that we could expect from that in terms of that second E, which I call efficiency and effectiveness, or efficiency or effectiveness. But if I have to choose, I will choose effectiveness over efficiency. The third E for me, which will again should guide the budget, is employment generation. This country needs employment for the people. Everybody is not an entrepreneur. Everybody is not going to start up. Everybody is not going to do, this cottage industry or small scale industry. Some people by nature require to use their talents, and we also need that talent to improve what we have within the own organization as employees. So therefore, for me, employment generation is very important, job creation. Again, I have something to say about that part also, that why this. The fourth to me is a very, very important aspect, and that particular thing I would call it employability or education, whichever you may take it. For me, employability and education are the family terms, the cognate terms, because one helps the other. Education today helps employee, even though whatever data we are receiving that 80% of the MBAs are not employable, or 75% or 90%, whatever comes to their mind, they say that engineers and this are not employable. I can assume that there is a truth in that, but I'm not going to believe that the entire thing is exactly the way they are saying. Probably your view of looking at them, probably your view of looking expectations also expecting from them has also changed. So therefore, I would say the fourth E should be about towards education and employability. And being a student of education throughout my life, I think, please forgive me if I have a bias towards that education and employability should be a part of that particular thing, because you cannot create a force for the future until they are employed, educated, stuff of that kind. And the fifth one to me is empathy. Empathy here would mean that the government should connect with the people, should be a part of helping them, because empathy shows your engagement with them. You cannot engage with anyone until you have an empathy. And this empathy has become a lot more important for budget makers, for government, for others, in view of what we are going through for the last 2 years. Those 2 years have become almost like the part of what we perhaps I have not experienced, and none on the panel has experienced, like First World War or Second World War, where the entire economy was subservient to an external activity of war, and how much people suffered as a result of that. I'm not saying that this is like a World War III, but I'm also saying that situation is exactly the same, where people are facing the same kind of issues there. So if we put these five E's together, to my mind, budget can get a direction, because the budget is a directional document also. It is not just giving account of what I have earned, what I have spent, what I'm going to earn from, where I'm going to spend to. That is a very, very, I would say, clerical aspects of the budget. It is not the budget. Nobody is looking at that particular time. People are looking what kind of priorities you are setting, what kind of mandates you are setting, what kind of possible attitude you have towards the society which has made you the ruler or the power center, or that you are a government. So government is looked to by the people for setting the directions, and budget is the major instrument in that. So from that point of view, I would say budget hasn't lost that kind of relevance as I mentioned earlier. But yes, budget is now one of the directional instruments because of the dynamism with which the government and the public is interacting with it. Let's look at things which are required as a result of these five things. Let's look at the last one and the first one together: equity and empathy. At this particular moment, you will see that the individual rate taxation is still very, very high, 30%, while the highest corporate rate is 25%. I believe that this kind of thing should be at par. That 25%, I know that one is productive, the second is consumptive. I get that. But I also get that the person who is consuming today is also creating funds for that kind of production, like in terms of housing, like in terms of children education or hospital bills and all those. So in my opinion, at least this is what I expect. Hopefully it is taken care of, that the highest slab rate becomes 25 lakhs, 25% rather than 30%, in my opinion. That is the high time they do that. The second thing in that particular thing I would say here is that even the slabs should be the same as in the case of the corporate taxation. So corporate taxation and in individual taxation, why should there be those kind of differences in terms of taxation? In my opinion, equity and empathy both work together in this particular direction. You mentioned yourself about ATC. I totally agree with you that this particular ATC must be increased. And not only should be increased, I would say here I will go to this real estate thing also. Most of the common man, and what is common man? Urban middle class person is common man. Neither Ambanis nor the person who is begging on the street, they are common men. They are not. They do not define us. What we are defined is by the common people that we have, the middle class urban people. So for that thing, I would very strongly recommend that this ATC should be enlarged, and it should be enlarged with all the legitimate expenditures, especially relating to your housing loan or stuff. Yes, for your home, not for the purpose of investment, because for that there is another section. But as far as under ATC is concerned, I think it should be included from that point. I would even go that even ATD should also be enlarged in terms of medical allowance. People are suffering these days. The whole family is suffering. We are spending money on medical expenses, upkeep and all that. In my opinion, it should be increased at least to 100,000 or 1 lakh rupees from the present one that we have. And it is not a bad idea, because that will allow people to also see battle overcome in the effective manner. So this is the second thing that I would like to say in terms of specific measures. In terms of standard deduction also, and here I comes from employment, education, and also even in terms of standard education, standard deduction, I think it should be increased. Why? Because many people are working from home. And therefore, this work expenses that you allow should also be allowed as home expenses. No, most of us are working from home, where we are putting more money on making our house look like an office. We have much more help required. All that particular time should be there. So in my opinion, standard deduction should also be seen. I'm not going to make a distinction on gender based, man and woman. I think that particular thing should be now, as we move towards equity between them, this thing should also be changed, so that we men women get very equitable, fair treatment. It is not that we are, of course women should be encouraged in many ways, but that's the thing I would like to say here. In terms of employability and education, I would say expenditure on education should be seen as a legitimate expenditure. So I'm not saying that that we should therefore send them to England, US, and everything. If you can send, if you see the benefit out of it, why not do it? No problem. A global education is always more useful than perhaps we give any credit to them, because our global exposure, global understanding becomes better. But educational expenditure, in my opinion, should also be considered as a legitimate expenditure for the individual taxpayers, so that they can take care of that. Now, there are many other things which I can keep on saying here or there. For instance, I believe that there is a need for a very good incentive, if the government can give in terms of both employability as well as employment. Why not provide startup incentives to the teenagers? I mean, we are giving a lot of benefits to these people, but provide a fund, create a fund where people can learn employability as well as entrepreneurship and startup things right in the beginning, maybe immediately after your high school, or maybe immediately after your eighth standard. We have seen many big entrepreneurs in this country who were only 8th standard or 10th standard when they started. Why not we create that kind of thing also for them? Some kind of a youth startup fund. So what I'm trying to say is there is a need to be breaking away from the system you have. So with this particular thing, Mr. Goel, I would like to hand it back to you with my very humble gratitude to you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Goel.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. And as Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal mentioned that he is not economist, but as we know that his knowledge, his experience, his dealing with the corporates, with the governments, it is not that one has to be economist to understand the budget, but one has to see, as you have the Professor Mohanlal Agrawal has rightly mentioned, that budget is not only the accounts or some clerical thing document, but it is also showing some direction, and that direction is required today. And that's why Professor Agrawal has very rightly mentioned how the 5 E's are required for making a very good budget. And he has his expectations about the medical bill. I will specifically highlight, yes, Today, the limit is 25,000, or for senior citizens, 50,000 is very, very less. Definitely, because that we have seen in COVID time how the expenses of 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs rupees per person were charged by the hospitals. So how to cover, although insurances are there, but still India requires a lot of push as far as the medical insurance is concerned. But anyway, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, for your giving vivid description about the union budget. And we hope that what expectations you have asked for, or your expectations are, may be fulfilled, either full or in part, at least on 1st of February 2022. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Professor 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra. Professor 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra is the Vice Chancellor of Rishi Hood University, Sonipat. He graduated with postgraduate degree in economics from Allahabad University. He did his PhD from Northeastern University, Boston. He taught there as a lecturer until 1990. He did his advanced training in financial management of local and regional governments from Harvard Institute for International Development, Harvard University, Cambridge, USA, under an USAID funding. He served as an economist at the Center for Social and Urban Research, Pittsburgh University, from 1990 to 1994. Thereafter, he turned to India to join as SDFC Associate Professor at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi. As member of the NIPFP team, he was the technical advisor to the first Punjab State Finance Commission. Professor Mishra served as the director of the Institute for Integrated Learning in Management, New Delhi, from 1996 to March 2000. He was the founding director of Institute for International Management and Technology from 2000 to 2008. He was director of 𝐂𝐑𝐔 𝐍𝐄𝐻 World Institute, Gurgaon, until September 2010. He was the founding vice chancellor of Auro University, Surat. He was the vice chancellor of Untitled University, Gurgaon. He is credited with the successfully running the first fully delivered foreign degree program in India. He has to his credit the establishment of 3 of the most successful foreign universities: Bradford University, Oxford Brookes University, and Lancaster University. Collaborations in India. Professor Dr. Mishra is author of 6 books and has written over 50 papers in referred journals. Welcome, Professor Dr. 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra on our show. Professor Mishra, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal has spoken and his expectations, etc. You being an economist, there is no doubt about it. So we would like to know your views on Union Budget 2020, challenges and expectations. Professor Dr. 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra, please.
Thank you so much, Goel. Let me begin by saying that we all have expectations as to what should happen, and every sector has, every individual has expectations. But the basic principle is very, very simple. We get only what we give. And this principle applies even at the government level. At the end of the day, the government gives back what it receives from us as citizens. Now, who gets back is a different story, because I may contribute a certain amount. It is not necessary that I will get back that amount. Somebody else may get it. That's what public finance is all about. So let's begin by thinking how this budget is going to be different. Well, we have gone through 2 years of very, very difficult times. We have spent money where probably in a normal year we would have not spent. Now we come to a year where we have to think about how do we jumpstart the economy. That's the most important thing that everybody is going to be looking at. Can we sustain the growth? Can we give a kickstart to the economy that jobs get created? So I'm trying to look at what's going to happen based on this basic principle. Kickstart the economy, generate jobs. So let's see what are those kind of things that we need to have? Let's first look at the general economy, and then we can come back to the individual levels as to how companies, individual sectors, or individuals will benefit, and whether we can match their expectations. I think there is a need to create liquidity in the economy if we want to kickstart the economy. We need to put more money into the hands of the people, either directly or indirectly. So the classical economics, very simple, give more money, people spend more money, they buy more things. And because they buy more things, demand is generated and suppliers are going to rise to match that demand and produce more and create more jobs, and people get more income. So you get into the same cycle of more jobs being created, more incomes being generated, more expenditures happening. So we are looking at the government to start moving in that direction. Unfortunately, in order to create more liquidity, it is not prudent for government to just give money to people and stand at every traffic light and start distributing money, that here's the money, go and spend it. That's a bad way of doing it. So what do we need to do? We need to identify priority sectors where expenditures have to happen. So a very, very common area, and especially a priority area for this government, has been infrastructure. Now, when we talk about infrastructure, we're not talking only about roads, we are talking about all sorts of infrastructure. We could be talking about digital infrastructure, we could be talking about healthcare facilities, we could be talking about the roads, bridges, railways, everything, airports, everything becomes part of the growth of infrastructure. I think that's going to be a big, big sector that we are likely to see in this budget. Because the more we are going to pump money into these sectors, the more jobs are going to be created to meet those demands. And more jobs will mean more income to the people, because some people who were not having jobs are going to get jobs, they will have incomes, and therefore their expenditures and demands will begin to rise. So the idea is to push the consumer demand to a new higher level. So I'm expecting to see a good amount of budgetary allocation for the infrastructure sector. That's one area. This will have a spiral effect and generate more employment, and hopefully have a higher level of growth. That's one thing which is very clear. Now, obviously, then we can break this into so many sectors, but let's also look at another sector which really can help in growth and generating growth and employment, is the real estate sector. There's no doubt, and Mohan mentioned that also. Real estate is a good area for the government to look at this point. So we need to jumpstart that. There has been a sluggish momentum in real estate, both from the point of view of sluggishness because of lack of demand, or people are postponing their purchases. So if we can push the real estate sector to a higher level, the allied industry, the demands are going to increase. And so what are those allied industries? The main two would be cement and steel. These are two sectors that will get a boost because of the real estate sector. And these are fairly high employment generating industries, so we should see some good amount of momentum that is going to get built around the real estate. So I'm hoping that. Now, to push the area of real estate, there are different ways. One is that are we giving some incentives to the people to buy or invest in the real estate? Are people going to buy a house because we give them an incentive? That could be possible. Or it could be direct benefits that are given to the real estate sector by the government. It could be either or them or both of them also. Two major sectors. Healthcare is going to be a big one. There is no doubt about it. And I think that will continue. Education is going to be there. Already there are announcements about medical colleges and other institutions, universities opening in different places. That will continue to happen. There are going to be areas where the government is going to try to put money directly into the hands of the people. Manrega may be one of those areas where which will create new jobs. I think Manrega, I'm expecting to see an increase in the budgetary allocation for that scheme because that is going to help us in creating more jobs in the rural sectors, which the government will be looking at this time. In terms of direct taxes, I think that everybody is expecting a reduction in the rates, as Mohan said very rightly. I think one of the things that we need to see is that reduction of rates cannot happen if the number of taxpayers does not increase. The tragedy of India's tax system has been that a very, very small proportion of India's population pays taxes. It has increased over the last 6-7 years, but I think we need to have a larger proportion of the people contributing to the tax revenues, which is not happening. I think tax rates can come down, and there is a lot of potential, but tax rates are going to go down in proportion to the increase of the number of taxpayers or participants in the collection of the revenues. So I'm not expecting a big reduction in tax rates at this point, but over years I think we should begin to expect, because we are getting more people to pay taxes, and I think the government is very using its tools very carefully to identify people's income, and there is a sort of a fear also. I think one of the areas where such type of reforms may be necessary is to link properties to Aadhaar card. I think the minute we begin to link the Aadhaar card with the properties that people own, we will see that there will be a lot of jump in the revenues of the government from this side, because all Benami properties, which is a big thing in India, are going to be identified. So I think I am also expecting that in terms of direct taxes, increase in the limits or the increase in the ATC. I'm expecting that, and the expectation is not because of any other reason except that whenever we make an increase in ATC, that is always going to result in investments that people are going to make, because you have to, if today it is 1 lakh and you make it 2 lakhs, then people have to put that 2 lakhs somewhere, right? And that's the source where government gets money. Suppose you buy a LIC policy, LIC gets that money, but also it becomes a pool for the government to take the money from there. So those are areas that are much easier for the government to do, because it allows them to get that pool of people's savings, which the government can take. We have to remember that LIC is a big investor in the government. And a large chunk of the profits of the LIC also go to the government. And the government can always borrow from LIC at very, very, very low rates. So whenever ATC increases, there is pool of money that it gets available to the government, whether it wants it or it doesn't want, that's a different thing. But it is available, and the money is in circulation. So I'm expecting that, you know, we should see some. Mohan mentioned that ATD. You know, I think it is possible that that could happen, but I'm not counting on it at this point because you know, I don't think that everything that we expect is going to be possible. There are limits to what we can do. I think at this time, my thinking is that you know, there is a need for us to think, how can we all, with little bit of pain, be able to drive an economy which will give us benefits in 1 or 2 years, 3 years, because we are all going through a difficult time. You know, as Goel have said at the beginning, that there are challenges of inflation. Well, one easy way is that we can print money like the United States has done. They have printed trillions and trillions of dollars, and today they are struggling with very, very high inflationary pressure. Fortunately, Indian government has not gone into that kind of a system of printing money to finance and we don't want to have a very, very high deficit also. So I'm expecting a fairly balanced budget this year with thrust areas. And so let's not go too much into expectations. I think what will be coming will be something which is very realistic. Everybody is not going to get everything, but that's the beauty of budget. We all have to cry after the budget is announced that I didn't get this or that. But I think this is going to be a budget that will hopefully take India into a new project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mishra, for giving your views about the budget, Union Budget 2022. And his main emphasis is that his expectations rather is that the infrastructure, real estate, health and education sector, Manrega, they should be giving some trust in this particular budget, because these are the sectors which are going to create jobs, which will be drive the economy out of the shamble what we are facing right now. And he also wants that the taxation rate should be reduced. But one important suggestion which he gave is the linking of Aadhaar with property. And he says that that is very, very important. Although the problem in India, practical problem which we all are facing is because of the hacking and the cyber crime. Once the linking of Aadhaar will be done with the property, you don't know when your property is being sold to someone else because of the hacking and the cyber crime. Unless that will not be foolproof, it's not that practical. But yes, it will bring many Benami properties in forthright. Thank you very much, Professor Kamlesh Mishra, and let's hope that the budget, as you have mentioned, will give us some direction towards a brighter light after the dark night. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Professor R.K. Arya. Professor R.K. Arya is the Professor of International Economics at Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies. One moment, please. Yeah. Sorry, Professor Arya is the Professor of International in Economics at Manav Rachna International Institute of Research and Studies, Faridabad. Dr. R.K. Arya is PG and PhD in Economics from Delhi University. He worked in Applied Economics and Social Welfare, Government of India. He contributed hundreds of articles in leading economic newspapers. He is guiding PhD scholars on various applied topics. He possesses through knowledge of social welfare, development, public policies, education, and employment. He attended many conferences, workshops, and presented papers. Presently, he is teaching MBA students. He has good understanding of international economics. Welcome, Professor R.K. Arya on our show. Professor R.K. Arya, you have heard Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, as well as you have heard Professor Dr. 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra, and both have given their ideas, their challenges, what they see in this particular budget the finance minister has to face, and their expectations from this budget. We would like to know from you, Union Budget 2022, challenges and expectation. Professor R.K. Arya, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goel. And as you have rightly pointed out that Dr. Agarwal and Dr. Mishra has given the insight into the budget and how the economy is being working for the last several decades, and what are the expectations in terms of 5 E's. And he has touched upon the taxation policy also, that where is the scope of cutting down the taxes. And 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra was has explained the things beautifully, that how taxes cannot be cut because we are in a tight fiscal situation. And in the midterm, what best we can do in the medium term. I will go past in the 1990, when we had the balance of payment situation, being fed up with the deficit financing, inflation, fiscal deficit. Of course, the import substitution was there. And probably now, after 20 years, 30 years, we have come back to same situation, that is the protectionism. The question is that why the market reforms were done, whether we did not want to mitigate poverty, whether we did not want to reduce the illiteracy rate, what was in our mind. So there is a dilemma that whether the market reform would have continued for longer period of time. Market reform were stuck up somewhere after the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, because the disinvestment, which was taken on war footing had stopped. And then the next governments were fickle-minded, whether the stake sale should be there or it should be the strategic sale of the assets and all there. So we are on the crossroad today, that the public sector is still with us and the private sector is not being accepted wholeheartedly. From 2004 to 2014, we mitigated the poverty and 10% of the people were lifted above the poverty level through Manrega and the welfare schemes launched by the government. But still we continue to have the growth, jobless growth. Jobless means the adequate jobs are not increasing. Roughly 60 crore people in terms of the population size were expected to be in the workforce, but at present we have little over than 40 crores. 20 crore workforce is missing, and it is exhibited in the unemployment and all that. Before COVID also, we had the growth rates, which has come down from 8.2% to 4%, which has created, the problem for the job growth. And also we had to see that the investment is not coming in. When the demand has fallen down, when the income of the people has collapsed during COVID, COVID has increased the vulnerabilities of the poor, migrant worker, casual laborers, and in the agriculture sector. We could not increase the Manrega beyond 70,000 crores, and only exceptionally for the COVID year, it was increased to 1,11,000 crores, but subsequently it has been reduced to 76,000 crores. It means the fiscal space is not there to spend on the, unproductive, semi-productive, you can say, because under Manrega, we continue to build the rural infrastructure through service sector as well as through investment in Manrega. The problem of the migrant workers was increased because we have micro units in the cities, that is roughly around 98.2%, are the MSMEs in which, sorry, they are the micro units in roughly 98.2%, and barely, 30 lakhs and little more than that. We have got the medium industries, which employ, that is more workers, 50 to 60 workers, or it can go to 400 or 500. And finally, what we can see, that the government had been shirking from, the signing of the FTAs, free trade agreement, and it has shirked from, that is the RECP, that is the Regional Economic Cooperation Partnership, because we don't think that we are competitive economy. Lot of companies are losing the space there in China, but they are being grabbed by the Bangladesh and Vietnam. Supply chain problems are still there. We are unable to have a good global value chains in the system. Service sector has taken the benefit after, liberalization. 55% of the GDP is coming from the service sector, and only 13% is contributed by the manufacturing sector. Total 28% is contributed by the industry sector, and only 17 to 18% is contributed by the agriculture sector. In terms of the workforce, it employs little over 3 crore people in the service sector, because they are the advanced public sector, which can have a limited number of employees, like you can see US companies like Amazon and the MasterCard and McKinsey, all these. So the service sector is a booming service sector, but it needs the software people, those who have got the knowledge and the understanding of working at high level. At the lower end, we have got the business workers, administrative workers, household workers. They are working at subsistence level, and they have got the deplorable condition in the economy. And the demand has to come from everyone, as Professor 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 Mishra has pointed out, that it is the lacking demand which is not growing the economy, which is not pushing the economy forward. And therefore, the demand creation is important, and the demand creation can come from, that is from the public spending, particularly on the infrastructure. Last time the budget was increased by 26%, and the economy has grown to 9.2% up in this particular year because of the higher capital investment. During the last 6 to 7 years, this construction sector has been bridled, because there was outgrowth there in the real estate due to the corruption and the higher trading of the real estate sector. Now the government has set up real investment trust and infrastructure investment trust. There is a scope that these are regulated, and how to bring the people into the real estate and start investing. There is a good scope, provided there are good jobs also across the cities in India. But for the time being, we have seen, as per the Oxfam report, that 84% people of India has seen their income reduced significantly, and roughly 2.3 crore people as on date has been pushed back into the poverty. These are to be alleviated. Now the question is that how we can do the justice in terms of equity to the people. The inequality has widened, which we never expected when we have liberalized the economy. Export sector has not contributed enough to the kitty, and therefore the fiscal deficit and current account deficit continue to be higher for a long time, and that is called acronym, that is the twin deficit. But the government from 2014 has taken the cognizance of the fiscal profligacy, and he tried to bridle it, and it was coming down from 4% to 3.5%, and there was a sudden disruption in the economy due to the COVID. COVID has shaken the roots of the MSME sector as well as the contact intensive sectors like the gyms, restaurants, hotels, and the communication, trade, and all that, where the people are closeted and they work together. So their vulnerability are very high. The marginal workers, the casual workers in the urban area and all that. Even though the Manrega was started as a rural employment guarantee program in 2005, it has given the dividend, but later we have seen the urban employment is not very good, and the small industries do not leave any scope for these people to work in a healthy environment, to get the good remuneration and work for it. And similarly, we have got the skilling level. Formal skilling is hardly 5% contributed by the ITI's, Industrial Training Institute, and the Polytechnic, but unskilled workers have arisen because of the poor education structure in the rural areas. They tend to migrate. There is no scope of agro-based industries. They are in the little scope. They are in the rural area. So these were expected to be absorbed, because generally we see that the rural areas are less inclined to the education. The school standard, the standard of the school is also not very charming there. As a result of which we have seen that the digital divide, which is reflected in the digital divide, health infrastructure has also been compressed, and it was not adequate to tackle. Therefore, the stringent lockdown and severe restrictions were put across the nation. Kerala, it continued to persist for longer period of time. Maharashtra had seen the highest fatality rate, and Delhi, being a small city, doesn't matter. In Uttar Pradesh, we had got severe problem. The budget, when we see of the union, it should have to be taken into account along with the, the federal states also, that they are spending roughly 2/3 of the capital expenditure and only 1/3 is expended. And the attention on the education and this nutrition was not adequate by the states, because they were expected to put more money there. In that case, in the health infrastructure, they were expected to boost the health infrastructure. Whatever little could they do, that is oxygen plants and the vaccination and the simple drugs and the special drugs and all that. Ultimately, the poor have no source of taking the healthcare facilities from anywhere. The civil hospitals at the country level are extremely good. That way, the states have taken care to build them up in a proper manner. But finally, we don't see that is the community health centers or the PHC in the rural areas, except in the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, that is the southern states. We can expect good healthcare there. But where the healthcare in the North India, like Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana and Punjab, all these states are having inadequate health infrastructure. Still, overall financing to the health infrastructure is expected to continue, because COVID is not going to leave anywhere in the next future. So it will remain there, diseases will be there. So universal health care has to be there, whether for the private people, those who are taking the Mediclaim, as you have yourself suggested, that the deduction on account of medical health care should be increased, Mediclaim should be increased from 25,000 to somewhat 50,000 or 60,000 rupees. And on the earning side, the government does not have any space, because the tax base is narrow, as Professor Kamlesh Mishra has also pointed out. So within that is only 1.5 crore people are paying the income tax. So how much we can extract from them? It is a long-term problem, because in the informal sector, there could be more expected taxpayers, but they are not paying the tax as such. So therefore, the tax kitty has not been increasing. Rather, the GST has surpassed the direct taxes, that is with 13 lakh crore, and here we are around 7 lakh crore, whereas GST is a regressive tax. It causes inflation and it reduces the purchasing power. It is a regressive tax, whereas the income tax is expected to be the progressive tax, but the people are bypassing the exemptions and deductions. They are paying less through that. So the government during the last 2 years has put up a new tax policy, but only 2% of the taxpayer have accepted where the new tax policy, because the exemptions and deductions were not there. roughly around 70 deductions and exemptions were not there. So in the medium term, there are two problems. One is that is the inflation has been going up there in the advanced countries. So therefore, the stimulus will have to be wound down. The stimulus given by the United States, that is $120 billion per month for since 2020. So now the inflation rate has gone up to 7%. It has to wound down, and the government, in fact, the RBI, this is basically RBI is the emperor without, clothes, that it has no control on the inflation because the divergence between the WPI and CPI is very high. That is at little over than 13% is the WPI, and CPI is around 5.69%. But the monetary policy cannot help there in closing the gap between the WPI and CPI. But the government has the anchor of CPI. That is, the inflation can be controlled by anchoring the CPI. It is not helping too much. So therefore, inflation setting is a difficult process with India. Monetary policy was loosened because the government wanted to borrow. The private sector investment was weak. So therefore, the government continued to borrow. Rather, the RBI has bought the bonds, government bonds also by printing the money. So once the private sector starts growing, definitely there will be a tightrope for the government to walk on. That is, the inflation can be still higher because the fiscal deficit, the 10 years yield has gone up to 6.57%. So that is causing a problem of long-term investment, because the long-term investment is possible only when the interest rates are lower. So we are having so many difficult situations as going forward. The immediate situation is, let the taxes should not be tweaked at this juncture, because the GST cannot be tweaked by the government, that it is there is an interstate council. What the government can do is that it should continue to focus on rural employment, the rural infrastructure, investment financing there in the rural infrastructure. Manrega should be increased. And at the same time, I will suggest for 4 to 5 years, that is the skilling, formal skilling by the states have to be increased, because the education system, when we see that the students are not adequately, their learning outcome is very low. So therefore, they cannot continue to have, that is the unskilled for long time. They remain unskilled for long time. The skilling is very important. This is the area. And somehow the MSMEs through the non-banking finance corporations regulations and the fintech, which is the new area, has to be taken care of. MSMEs, the interest rate should reduce, and their size, particularly their size, should grow from micro to small and then to medium. There should be very limited micro units. So for example, out of 6 crore 30 lakhs units which we have as MSMEs, they should be reduced, the micros should be reduced to 50% of that, which is now at more than 98%. Unless we have the economies of scale, the cost will be a problem, interest rate is a problem, labor is a problem, unskilled workers are problem. So therefore, skilling and the credit outgo. At present, we have got the credit outgo of 55% of the GDP by the banks, whereas in advanced countries, it is sometimes 100% and 150% of the GDP. So the credit health of the economy should increase, and it is possible with the NBFC playing their part, and fintech are the payment instrument. They can do their role, but cannot replace the banks. Capital convertibility has been delayed for a long time, and at the same time, what we see is that that is the infrastructure spending up to 102 lakh crore has to be met out of the state capital expenditures and the central government expenditure. And also we are including our sovereign bond into the bond indices, global bond indices, and nitty-gritty of the bond indices, that is what will be the tax structure and all that, is to be seen in the budget. And what finally I want to say that the backtrack of the policy decision of the land acquisition, which was set up, which was introduced in 2014, was not expected to be withdrawn because the productivity of the agriculture is a concern, and therefore the government has to backtrack because rehabilitation was a problem. And this time the agricultural laws, which were framed very carefully and were put up in the legislation with curiosity, had to be withdrawn because the political concern is more than the economic concern. So the budget has to go along with the policy decision. There should not be backtracking. The IBC, which was done last time, it is paying some dividend. Privatization of the bank should be on the agenda. And the LIC, and the BPCL, which has to be divested, it has to be as fast as possible. And privatization of the two banks which were put up there in the last budget has to be quickly done in case you want that the credit strength improves in the economy. Employment situation has to be generated through MSMEs and spending more money with the MSME incentivization. PLI is going on. That is 13 sectors, and more sectors need to be included. I think I have exhausted my time.
Yeah,
And
yes.
Dr. Goel is giving his signal.
Yes, please.
And I am winding up with my graceful thanks to Dr. Goel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Acharya, for giving the entire condition of the economy of India. And you have mentioned all the challenges which the finance minister has to face. And even you have given the expectations and the suggestions how one can do it. Thank you very much. Paucity of time. I would not like to waste my time now. I would like to invite my last but not the least panelist guest with us. He is Dr. Sanjay Shah. Dr. Sanjay Shah is the visiting faculty of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekanand Educational and Research Institute, Ranchi. Dr. Sanjay Saha graduated from Ramakrishna Mission Residential College, MSc from Calcutta University and PhD from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. He served as faculty and principal in degree colleges, management and technical institutes in India and in international arena for 28 years. He worked in SOCHAM. He published books, articles in national and international journals. He is at present academic consultant and trustee member of Bright, Kolkata and visiting faculty of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekanand Educational and Research Institute, Ranchi. Welcome, Dr. Sanjay Saha on our show. Dr. Sanjay Saha, you have heard Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, you have heard Professor Dr. Mishra, as well as you have heard Professor Dr. R.K. Arya. And they all have given the challenges which the finance minister has to face and their expectations. Now we would like to know your views on Union Budget 2022, challenges and expectations. Dr. Sanjay Saha, please. Please unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Lal. Is it okay, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Now, what are the challenges so far the ministry is having? We are all talking about the pandemic issues, but in addition to that, the ministry is also having some issues related to natural calamities happened across the country last year. The ministry is also having a problem at the international border. So they have to spend huge amount of money on defense. In addition, the ministry is also having some election issues. We know from the second week of February, if some elections are going to happen in 5 states. So these are some of the issues which they have to take into consideration while presenting the budget itself. In addition, there is an uncertainty in the world market. Domestic market is decreasing. And also, COVID has not left the world market. So they are also having some problem. We don't know their actions. Production constant, which is also taking place, especially in the energy sector. And also we have seen the service sector contribution is going down. Why? Because there is an uneven growth of certain sectors within the service sectors like hotel, tourism, travel, transport. And we are also having pressure from the international market. As a result, exchange rates are going against us. Now, we are having problems. and we cannot expect a huge change in the forthcoming budget, which will be presented after a few hours. Now, as an Indian and being a middle-class family people, what we can say is that countries should develop if the infrastructure is developing. So we cannot stop the infrastructural development. So there is a shortage of money. So how they can get this money? Number one, what it seems to me, through transparent process of monetization. So monetization process has already been started. We have seen 2 days before also how Tata have got the Indian Airlines, and government has received near about 20,000 crores. So monetization process is there and will be there, maybe in airport, airlines, transport, and as well as highways. So they will get money and infrastructure development can be continued. Government cannot stop certain initiative they have taken, like PM Krishan Yojana, where 6,000 rupees every farmers are getting per year, which may be increased near about another 2,000. So this is one area where we are expecting the government will come up with certain routes and policy. Then another issue is there, that is the employment scenario, how employment can be generated more and more. Already my previous speakers have already mentioned how it can be, but what it seems to me, in addition to all these things, what it seems to me that MSME should get much more support from the government. You know, ECGLS scheme, they have already saved near about 14 lakhs SME in the last 2 years, and more than 1.5 crores jobs are saved. So this type of some more policy is expected from the coming budget. And on the other hand, personal tax exemption, yes, that is also area where already my previous speakers have given enough issues, and I think government will take care of some of these issues also. But to me, one area that requires some short-term contingency plan, at least for 2022, 23, and 23, 24, that is revival of the service sector, that is travel, tourism, and transport. Because this sector used to contribute near about 40% of the service sector. So huge gap has already been created. So employment is also hampered. So if government can give some boost of some incentives, so this sector will come up, and this will also contribute to the economy as a whole. Then there is a need that government should give some thrust to boost up the exports, because Atmanirbhar, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, all these things are there. So quite natural, people are expecting that how much more liberal export policy can be in the budget. So we are expecting some policy will be there to enhance the exports. And also we are expecting some policy to increase the inflow of FDI within our country, because we are already facing shortage of capital. So that is required. We are also expecting that government will take care certain policy, especially with respect to health, pharma, and education, because we have seen the huge gap in the health sector, shortages of doctors, shortages of nurses, shortages of health workers, as well as ICU, as well as your beds. So all these things we have already seen in the last 2 years. So we are expecting that much more money should be given to boost up the health sector as well as the pharma company, so that they can give much more thrust on their R&D activities. My previous speaker have already highlighted the education sector, so I would like to add only 2 points there itself. One is that some policy should be there, as we are expecting in the budget, that foreign good universities, they should be given some impetus so that they can come up with some campuses or their branches in India, so that our students should not go out of India. And in this way, we can also save some foreign reserve within us. And then another is area where the government should give some incentive to the private sector, so that much more school, colleges, and universities should come up. And in this case, we can also think about PPT model, as it is happening in some health sector. And what we are also expecting, that government should come up with some policy so that educational institutes, as well as teachers, faculties, people associated with education organization and our students, they should get some some impetus from the policy itself, as they have to invest huge amount of money for this digitech education, which is replacing offline classroom education. Regarding direct tax, not so many changes we are expecting, but what it seems to me that the CSR expenditure, what the companies are doing, especially in the last 2 years, on their employees' welfare like vaccination, health, and their treatment for COVID-related issues, that should be given some exemption, and government should think about this. And then one more area where we are expecting some concrete policy, like the investment in cryptocurrency, because government has already given signal regarding cryptocurrency uses. But people are afraid what type of infrastructure will be there and what type of tax policy will be there. So we are expecting there should be some transparent tax policy government will be introducing in the forthcoming budget on investment in cryptocurrency. GST, we cannot think about so many things, but what we are expecting is that the GST on medical expenditure or medical equipments or in medical premium, insurance premium, those things should be taken care of. Now, what is we are talking about that we are just saying that exemption limit on this medical insurance premium should be increased. But what we are not considering is that how the medical insurance premium has been increased. Why it has been increased tremendously in the last 2 years? Who has given them the power? It's the government. So on the one hand, we are saying exemption limit should be increased, but on the other hand, we are not considering why this premium is increasing so much unnecessarily, because people are already having very less amount of disposable income within their hand. And we have seen how the COVID issues have taken so much money out of the pocket, which was unforeseen. We never thought that this could be in our life. Now, government should think about that premium should be decreased, not increased, and accordingly, the insurance regulatory authority should be given instruction and some policy should be there. Similar is the case, what is happening if you find that in the last couple of months, all of a sudden, internet costs have been increased. Now, without internet, how we can run the education as on date? Have we thought about it? But increased internet costs, all of a sudden it is happening. You can check from your internet billing itself. So government should give the telecommunication department certain policy issues so that at least for students or people who are actively engaged in this education sector, they should get some incentive in the coming budget. And accordingly, regulation should be there. So with all these things, what it seems to me that we cannot think about so many changes because of the political issues, as I have mentioned, and also because the problem which we are facing in the international border, but we can expect certain things, and it should be a holistic budget. We cannot think about a one-sided, loop-sided budget. But farmers, quite natural, they have to satisfy. So we can expect a drastic, some good policy will be there to take care of the farmers' sentiments, because ultimately they have to win the election. So what we are expecting that these things will be also taken care of, and at the cost of maybe some other sectors. On the NRI expectation, already Dr. Mohan Agarwal sir has mentioned many things. What it seems to me, only 2 points I would like to add here. Now, NRIs are also interested to invest in senior citizen scheme, PPF or NSC, all these things, but they are not getting the tax relief as Indian residents are getting. So this is another area that NRI is expecting something will be there in the forthcoming budget. And also they're expecting there should be parity in TDS, especially on stock and mutual fund, as well as capital gains on property, because it is very high for them on capital gains on property. It is almost 20 to 28% based on the short-term capital gains as well as long-term capital gains. On the other hand, it is near about 15 to 30% in case of your stocks and as well as mutual funds. Now, though in the last budget, NRI got certain things like some relaxation on residency rules, and they have also got 1% company setting up in India, and also they have got tax exemption on your housing and as well as property issues. but they are also expecting some of these things in the forthcoming budget. But we, as Dr. Mishra has mentioned very clearly, we have to know, we should know very well what we are contributing. If we are contributing, only then we can expect certain things will get back. Because what is happening nowadays is that the government is giving so many things that free of cost, whether it is money, whether it is your medical, whether it is your education, but to some sectors, to some people, but not for others. So what is happening, it is creating some imbalance within the society. So they should think about where these imbalances can be eliminated and people will get proper education, proper health, and also proper employment. We have not talked about the vocational thing. So vocational skill, I think, should be upgraded. Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you very much,
for giving it.
Dr. Sanjay Saha, for giving your views and paucity of time. So I would not like to say further, but he has already made all the points. Now my question goes to Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, whatsoever we are talking today, but we have to keep in mind what Dr. Sanjay Saha has hit on the nail, that there's 5 states are facing elections. And it is very, very clear that the ruling government doesn't want to lose this election, especially in Uttar Pradesh. And the expectation is that this budget will be a populist budget, keeping in mind of these 5 states election. Then whatsoever we are talking of it and etc., will not give that importance. They have to win the election. What you say about this? It will be a populist budget or not, which we will see on 1st of February.
You're always, enjoying to provoke me and come up with some comments. So here is first. Number one, by the definition of populism that you are given, each and every country is populist, whether it is Biden or whether it is in Germany or everywhere. They are more populist than we are. So therefore, let's not say that just because government is doing something in order to stay in power and win to fight another day, it is something wrong. So I don't agree with that. It is not populism. It is the way to stay the course and do things better by retreating possibly a bit on a particular day. The second thing is that I also perhaps do not agree with my esteemed friend Dr. Mishra when he said in the beginning that you get what you give. I don't think that's the way it is. We give to them our trust, and that trust itself is good enough. Our loyalty or confidence is good enough for them to find resources. So therefore, if a government is giving back to us on the basis of what we give, then that government is not worth the name, the government that it is. It must generate creative means of getting resources from the world in order to create agenda of the future. And that's the idea behind Dubai, behind UAE, and many other countries like this, like Singapore, or for that matter, any other country. They don't get much, but they still give more. Why? Because they are creative in the resource allocation, mission building, and creating a lineup of resource people from outside. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Agrawal. Now my question goes to Professor Kamlesh Mishra. Professor Mishra, you being in education sector, and we have seen that NEP 2020, which was supposed to be implemented, but because the funds allocation of NEP 2020 was of 6%, do you think that this budget will increase the allocation in the education sector and match with what was the projected in NEP 2020, that 6% or not? Please unmute. Please unmute. Please unmute.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think first I want to keep the implementation of the NEP away from this budgetary allocation, because the implementation of NEP is the responsibility of the institutions. And they should not expect that the government is going to give them money to implement it, except for the public universities. The private sector, which is now larger than the public sector in terms of education, about 70% of higher education is now under the private sector, right? So we should expect that implementation wise, this is the responsibility of the individual institutions. Public sector, yes, they may want some money because they will say, now we need more faculty, we need these things, so the government has to pay salaries. That doesn't account to too much. I have always been in favor of having higher budget for education. I still feel that 6% is too less, a budget for higher education for a country like India, which is planning to grow at a faster rate. And in the next 15 years, 20 years, we want to become the economic superpower. We cannot do that without education. We cannot do it unless we are willing and able to make an investment. But the problem, Lal, is that as Mohan was saying previously, that every budget is a populist budget, right? So we have a limited amount of money, and that is what I meant to say, that when we should not expect more than what we give. What I mean is that as a nation, we generate certain amount of money for the government. As a nation, we need to spend some money, right? If we keep on spending more than what we can generate, then obviously we have fiscal deficit and we have so many problems because of that.
Okay.
So I think we need to keep focus that I would like to see about 8 to 9% allocation for higher education to take the country to the next level.
But our allocation in the last year was very less, not even 6%.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's hope this is expectation, and let's see that what we will see on the 1st of February. Thank you very much, Professor Mishra. Now my question goes to Dr. Arya. How have last 3 budgets contributed to such deficits that RBI reserves were tapped and PSU equity had to be sold? Why the budgets were not planned properly, and we have to take out all the reserves of the RBI, and we have to sell the PSUs, and we are planning to sell, although right now it is on hold because of the elections and whatnot, but ultimately they are planning to sell. So don't you think this is somewhere our budget preparations are not in a proper way, which has to be either due to the elections, as Professor Agarwal says, that everyone have to be there in the power by hook and crook. So do you think that this time something will come in budget?
Sorry, sir, I never said by hook or crook.
I know, Professor Agarwal, but Professor Agarwal, populist budget doesn't mean that we will give the budget in such a way that the power, after all, if they are today in the power, tomorrow someone else will come, then they will again go for more populist budget. So ultimately, who will be the sufferer? The country is suffering, which you are also knowing, and you are giving example of UAE, and others are giving example. So we have to see the allocation of funds in many of the sectors. So my question to Dr. Arya is, don't you think the budget should be more balanced than keeping in mind about the elections, or keeping in mind of the so much few sections of the society, their sentiments? 1 minute, please. I have no time now left. 1 minute, please. Dr. Arya.
You must have seen that on 19th November, the government has rolled back the agriculture laws eyeing on, that is the UP elections. Now, when you say that it has not to be a populistic election, then definitely on 10th February, the election starting, the BJP is bound to lose. Therefore, the farmer appeasement has to be there, and rural infrastructure, mandis building, and food processing organization and agro-based industries have to be started, because UP is contributing almost 1/5 in the GDP. So that is very, very important. It cannot be ignored. Otherwise, it will do the double mistake. One, the agriculture laws, which were well balanced, well thought of by the economists like Ramesh Chandra and Ashok Gulati. Many 40 top economists have contributed in the formulation of the agriculture laws. Market reforms were needed. So therefore, some inclination of the spending will be there for the UP alone. That is. And second thing, that is the disinvestment you talked about. There is a complication at the administration level. People are fearing from Central Vigilance Commission, CBI, and all that. Therefore, the disinvestment is not possible in such a gloomy environment. So
Okay,
all
okay.
these things
Thank you,
are
thank
playing
you.
out.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Arya. Now my last question goes to Dr. Shah. Dr. Shah, do you think in this budget the government is going to decrease the rate of petroleum products, keeping in mind the elections as they have done earlier after losing the bypolls in Himachal Pradesh and others? Dr. Shah.
See, Dr. Lal, that whatever election issues are going to be there, already government has taken the necessary steps. You cannot expect that any more reduction in the petroleum prices, at least in the coming 2 months. Definitely no. Whatever is done, it is done only. Yes, they can think about some certain substitute, but if you see the 5 states, there is only one commonality, that is agriculture. So they have to please the farmers and they have to come out in a budget, it's a centralized budget. So central policy will be there to take care of the farmers' issue. They have to own the, they have to win the election. Only then they can come out in 2024.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Shah. So viewers, we have seen today that the expert views about the Union Budget 2022, they have expressed their views about the finance minister is facing and their expectations. But one has to understand, after all, the resources are limited, and because of the pandemic of last 2 years, the economic resources of the government has gone down like anything. So to expect much and more, I think we are in the fool's paradise. But whatsoever the balanced budget, I'm sure Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman is going to present. Let's hope the expectations which our experts have made will be fulfilled, so that the people will get some reliefs. And definitely the election year is there for 5 states. I'm sure, as all our panelists, all the panelists has mentioned about that, it is budget will be keeping in mind the view of those elections. So definitely there will be relaxations, no further taxes are expected. Thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Caru News, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News 𝐂𝐀𝐑𝐔 𝐍𝐄𝐖𝐒, Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, as well as it was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And in our endeavor to bring to you everyday new topic. And tomorrow in media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Tomorrow, you know, the tragic thing which has happened in India. Some mad person has killed our father of nation. And so the topic is Gandhi philosophy relevant today? And to discuss this very, very important topic, we have Professor Dr. Pramod Pathak. He's an international corporate tenor, public speaker, blogger, and columnist. And then we have Advocate Shashank Dev Sudhi, Supreme Court, New Delhi advocate. And then we have Mr. Nirmal Anju Verma. He is a social activist and a spokesperson, Bihar Pradesh Congress Committee, Patna. So they will be giving their views. Is Gandhi philosophy relevant today? So please tune in tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Kamlesh Mishra. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. R.K. Arya, as well as thank you very much, Professor Dr. Sanjay Shah, for giving and enlightening all of us about this budget 2022. And thank you all the viewers. And we hope that on 1st of February, you will come to know what is going to happen in our budget. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.